I grew up playing the basketball with the boys, so like it's always been physical and feisty, and like that's what it is, and you got to find a way to hold your own.
Caitlin Clark, just 2 minutes ago, the unthinkable struck. The WNBA's brightest star has suddenly resigned, leaving fans stunned and teammates shattered. Rumors swirl in the shadows. Was it a brutal falling out with league officials? A devastating injury concealed? Or a scandal too dangerous to speak aloud? Sophie Cunningham's voice cracked. Lexie Hull's tears burned, their grief spilling into the cameras. The arena feels colder, the silence heavier. What truth could force Clark to walk away? The answers will shake everything. The Caitlin Clark mystery. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom who transformed the WNBA overnight, has become the center of the league's most baffling storm. Just days ago, she was not only playing but dominating, leading her team in points, assists, and even the nightly headlines. She wasn't struggling, she wasn't injured, and she certainly wasn't missing practices. She was the spark that packed arenas, boosted television ratings, and pulled in an entirely new wave of fans. Yet, in an instant, she was gone. No warning, no explanation, nothing but silence. The shock spread like wildfire. Within minutes, theories multiplied. Some voices close to the game whispered about load management, a term often used to disguise rest or minor injuries. Others hinted at vague, disciplinary reasons. But the pieces didn't fit. Clark hadn't broken the rules. She hadn't disrespected teammates. In fact, she was doing everything right, on the court and off it. That's what made the disappearance feel less like a benching and more like an erasure. Something deeper was happening, and those watching could feel it in their bones. Then came the whispers from behind closed doors. Sources with knowledge of internal league discussions revealed a growing tension between Clark and certain high-ranking officials. Her rapid rise wasn't just about scoring points. It was about her voice. Post-game interviews turned into headline moments. Social media clips of her blunt honesty ricocheted across platforms. She wasn't following the unspoken rule of blending in. She was standing out. And not everyone at the top seemed comfortable with that. One rumor in particular lit the fuse. In a private meeting, Clark allegedly challenged league marketing strategies, calling them tone-deaf and disconnected from the fans she felt she represented. She didn't sugarcoat her words. She didn't bow to authority. She spoke plainly, and according to those present, the exchange landed badly. Within 48 hours, her minutes on the court began to shrink. By 72 hours, she was benched completely. What followed was worse. No press conferences, no interviews, no direct statements. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, turning one of the league's brightest lights into a ghost. Fans, however, refused to let her fade. Hashtags like #WhereIsCaitlin began trending within hours. Comment sections are filled with outrage. Calls for transparency echoed across X, Instagram, and TikTok. Thousands of loyal supporters demanded to know the truth. NBA stars joined the chorus, labeling the league's handling of Clark as shady, calculated, even disrespectful to the integrity of the game. Each unanswered question fueled more suspicion, and the WNBA's silence only magnified the uproar. What began as confusion has now transformed into defiance. This isn't just about silence anymore. It's about silencing. And with every passing hour, the mystery around Caitlin Clark grows heavier, pressing down on a league already struggling to control the narrative. For the first time, the WNBA isn't just fighting a controversy. It's fighting the fans who refuse to look away. And as Sophie Cunningham ignites the fire, one haunting question remains: can the WNBA survive when its silence fuels rebellion? Stay tuned. Sophie Cunningham ignites the fire. When Caitlin Clark vanished from the spotlight, the silence was suffocating. But into that silence stepped Sophie Cunningham, and everything shifted. Reporters were still scrambling for scraps of information, fans were flooding league inboxes with outrage, and the WNBA's leadership remained mute. Then Sophie spoke. She didn't tiptoe. She didn't choose safe words. She went scorched earth. It happened in a post-game interview that should have been routine. Instead of polite cliches and rehearsed sound bites, Sophie delivered a line that detonated across the sports world. You don't sideline your biggest star unless you're scared of her power. The moment the words left her mouth, the air in the room froze. Reporters leaned forward, stunned. And before the league's PR team could draft a single response, that clip exploded across social media. Within hours, it was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram Reels, highlight channels, podcasts. Fans replayed it like an anthem. But Sophie wasn't finished. What could have been a single outburst became a relentless campaign. On her podcast, she doubled down, accusing the league of something more sinister: retaliation. She claimed Clark's benching had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with politics. The league, Sophie charged, was more interested in control than progress, more obsessed with protecting its authority than celebrating the very talent that kept the league alive. She went further than most players dared, saying aloud what many whispered in private, that Clark's punishment was a warning, designed to remind athletes what happens when they speak too boldly or shine too brightly. Her words sliced through the silence like a blade. In team meetings, Sophie repeated them. On live broadcasts, she refused to soften her stance. She wasn't afraid of consequences, because to her, the real danger wasn't losing minutes or drawing fines. It was letting the league erase one of the most important players of this generation without a fight. And the fans responded. Her courage became contagious. Hashtags turned from anger into action. Stand with Sophie and Free Clark began trending side by side, carried by thousands of voices. What started as a lone statement had become a movement, a swelling current that the league could no longer ignore. Fans rallied not just for Clark, but for Sophie too, praising her as the only player willing to risk everything to call out what they believed was injustice. It was a spark the WNBA had not anticipated, and it spread faster than anyone could contain. The fire was no longer about one player's disappearance. It was about an entire league's credibility. Sophie Cunningham had thrown open a door that the WNBA desperately wanted to keep shut, and behind it stood truths that threatened to rewrite the future of the game. Now, what began as Caitlin's absence now engulfs the league's survival. But what explosive truth hides behind Lexie Hull's silence? Keep watching. Lexie Hull breaks the silence. Sophie Cunningham's fire had already rattled the walls of the league, but the very next day the storm grew fiercer. Lexie Hull stepped into the fray, and she did it with a different kind of power. She didn't craft a long statement. She didn't sit down for a cozy podcast, and she didn't lean on carefully rehearsed lines. Instead, she walked straight into the press room after practice, fixed her eyes on the cameras, and dropped one sentence that cut deeper than any speech. If Caitlin Clark can be treated like this, what do you think they'll do to the rest of us? The room froze. No spin, no polish, just raw truth laid bare. Reporters stopped scribbling. Players listening from the back shifted uneasily, and within minutes, the clip exploded beyond the confines of women's basketball. It wasn't just WNBA fans reacting anymore. It was every corner of the sports world, from ESPN anchors to YouTube commentators, all repeating the same stunned question: what exactly is happening behind closed doors at the WNBA? Lexie didn't stop there. Hours later, she posted a striking black and white photo of herself alongside Caitlin Clark. The caption was just one word: loyalty. That single word triggered a storm of speculation. Was she calling out betrayal in the locker room? Was it aimed at management? Was it a warning to teammates under pressure to stay quiet? Nobody knew for sure, but the timing was impossible to ignore. And the ambiguity only added to the tension. Behind the scenes, reports began to leak. Insiders claimed Lexie had become one of the loudest voices in team meetings since the controversy began. According to one account, she directly confronted coaching staff, demanding to know why the only player consistently selling out arenas was suddenly glued to the bench. Teammates, the report said, backed her up. What had started as whispers of division inside the locker room quickly spilled into the headlines, painting a picture of a team no longer united under the weight of secrecy. And it wasn't just her own team. Lexie hinted that players across multiple franchises had been quietly holding their own discussions, away from cameras and league officials, sharing fears and frustrations about how the Clark situation was being handled. The pressure to stay silent was real, but so was the growing determination not to let the moment pass unnoticed. Sources suggested Lexie was helping to rally a group of younger players, athletes who felt trapped under old politics, tired of being told to play, smile, and stay quiet, even as their voices were being erased. Then came the tweets. Cryptic, emotional, and impossible to ignore. One in particular sent shockwaves before being deleted. If you want to build a legacy, stop silencing the ones who create it. Fans screenshotted it instantly. Within hours, it was everywhere, on Reddit threads, TikTok edits, and fan forums. Some believed the message was aimed squarely at WNBA executives. Others argued it was directed at media figures accused of downplaying the controversy. But one thing united everyone. Lexie wasn't just reacting to events. She was declaring war on silence itself. Together, Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull had become a front line, two players willing to risk everything by speaking truths others buried. And with their defiance, the league suddenly faced not just a controversy, but the makings of a full-blown uprising. So how far will Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull's defiance push the WNBA toward collapse or rebirth? Stay glued, the revolution awaits. The fans turn the tide. Once Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull broke the silence, it was as if a match had been struck in a room full of gasoline. Fans didn't just react, they erupted. What began as outrage quickly transformed into a digital rebellion, one so loud and relentless that the WNBA could no longer pretend not to hear. Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, every platform lit up at once. Hashtags poured across timelines in a flood. Hashtag Justice for Clark, hashtag Free Caitlin, hashtag Stop Silencing Stars. Each one carried more weight than the league's official statements, because each one came straight from the people who filled arenas, bought jerseys, and streamed games religiously. Within hours, WNBA accounts were being swarmed. Every post, whether about a highlight, a sponsorship, or a charity event, was hijacked by angry comments demanding answers. Sports forums, usually buzzing with debates over stats and strategies, became battlegrounds of frustration and suspicion. But the uprising didn't stop at hashtags. Fans became investigators. They started digging into game footage, pulling freeze frames, comparing minutes played, and building timelines that told a story the league refused to explain. Some clips showed Clark being shoved on drives to the basket, her body hit hard without a whistle from the referees. Others highlighted the baffling drop in her minutes, even as she continued to post stellar numbers. Side-by-side comparisons revealed something disturbing. While other stars were celebrated, Clark's coverage on the WNBA's own social media pages had quietly dwindled. The findings spread like wildfire. TikTok videos splicing together clips of missed foul calls racked up millions of views. Reddit threads broke down her playing time with forensic precision. Screenshots of the league's official accounts before and after the controversy circulated widely, with fans accusing the WNBA of deliberately pushing Clark out of the spotlight. The narrative was no longer just about one player being benched. It had evolved into something bigger, a public trial of the league's credibility. And the fans weren't whispering, they were shouting. "Why hide the star who brought us here?" one viral post asked. "If they can erase Caitlin Clark, what does that mean for the future of the game?" The questions echoed louder with every share, every retweet, every post. The rebellion was no longer contained online. It had become the heartbeat of a movement, pulsing through sports culture with a force too strong for the league to contain. But what did the league unleash when Sophie and Lexie drew their line in the sand? Rebellion or revolution? Stay with us as more mystery unravels. The statement that backfired. For nearly 2 days, the league said nothing. The chants online grew louder, players were calling out management directly, and the storm around Caitlin Clark refused to die down. When the WNBA finally broke its silence, the moment that should have eased tensions only poured gasoline on the fire. A polished statement appeared across the league's official channels. The tone was sterile, corporate, and strangely detached from reality. It didn't mention Caitlin Clark by name. It didn't acknowledge the growing controversy or the accusations of silencing players. Instead, it reduced everything to a bland explanation, a strategic rotational decision, and asked fans to simply trust the process. The backlash was instant. Reporters tore into the vagueness. Players rolled their eyes publicly. And fans, already furious, now saw the statement as confirmation of what they suspected all along. This wasn't transparency. This was a cover-up. It felt like a calculated attempt to minimize a decision that had already ignited one of the biggest rebellions in WNBA history. The league's PR machine was working overtime, but the strategy was outdated. This wasn't 2004, when carefully worded press releases could bury a scandal. Fans in 2025 had receipts, timestamps, footage, side-by-side comparisons, and social media made sure the narrative stayed alive. Attempts to spin the story only made it bigger, louder, and harder to contain. Then came the players' reactions. Sophie Cunningham responded not with another fiery speech, but with something far simpler. A single eye-roll emoji posted on Twitter. No caption, no explanation. Within minutes, it racked up tens of thousands of likes. The message was unmistakable. We see through this. Lexie Hull followed with her own strike. She reposted a clip of the statement being read on air with the biting caption, "So, we're pretending this is normal now." The sarcasm cut sharply, and fans devoured it. They echoed her words across platforms, turning them into a rallying cry. Even veteran voices joined in. One former WNBA star tweeted bluntly, "Rotational decisions don't erase your MVP candidate without a reason. Something else is going on, and it stinks." That one line summed up the sentiment rippling across the sports world. The fallout was immediate and measurable. Merchandise sales for Caitlin Clark jerseys, which had been breaking records just weeks earlier, suddenly plummeted overnight. Ticket refunds spiked in cities where fans had been buying seats solely to watch her play. YouTube highlight reels that once celebrated her game were now flooded with comments like, "RIP to the only reason I watched." The momentum Clark had single-handedly built, the sold-out arenas, the swelling fan base, the fresh energy injected into women's basketball, was unraveling at lightning speed. And the league wasn't just facing angry tweets anymore. Sponsors were watching. Their money, their partnerships, their image, all tied directly to how the WNBA handled this crisis. The question wasn't whether the damage had been done. The question was how deep it would go. And what did the sponsors demand behind closed doors, and could their ultimatum decide the league's fate? Don't miss this part. The league cracks wide open. The silence from the league had already cost them trust, but the damage was far from over. According to leaked reports, at least 2 of the WNBA's brand partners reached out privately to league officials, asking for clarification before they continued with promotion. In corporate language, that was less a request and more a warning. Fix this mess or risk losing our support. Sponsorships that had taken years to secure were suddenly dangling by a thread. And yet, the league doubled down. No follow-up statement, no interviews, no apology. just more tightly managed messaging behind the scenes, while the outrage from players and fans kept exploding across every platform. The WNBA seemed determined to spin the story until it vanished. But what they failed to understand was this: when you silence one voice, a dozen others rise up to take its place. And that's exactly what began happening next. Inside locker rooms across the league, alliances were forming. Conversations that once revolved around game plans and scouting reports had shifted into something heavier, more dangerous. Players who had laughed together before tip-off were now whispering in corners, avoiding eye contact, and questioning loyalties. Some wondered which teammates would stand with them, and which would side with the league to protect their careers. The situation had grown beyond controversy. It was radioactive. Sources close to multiple franchises described a growing divide: veterans versus newcomers, silence versus rebellion, loyalty to the badge versus loyalty to the truth. The cracks were spreading wider with every passing day. At the center of it all stood Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull. They had already spoken out, already risked their reputations to challenge the league. But when the anger online finally seemed to cool just slightly, they struck again. And this time, they weren't reacting, they were leading. In a joint interview broadcast live across sports networks, Sophie and Lexie sat shoulder to shoulder. Their faces were stern, their words sharper than ever. No smiles, no polite diplomacy, just truth, delivered without hesitation. Sophie went first. Looking directly into the camera, she said the words that broke the internet. "If this is how you treat the player who built your league, no one's safe." The room fell into silence. Reporters, normally quick with follow-ups, were stunned. The weight of her statement hit like a punch to the gut because it was no longer just about Caitlin Clark. It was about every player who had ever been told to keep quiet or risk everything. Then Lexie delivered her strike. "We've been told to stay quiet for too long." Not anymore. Simple, raw, final. The line in the sand had been drawn. Within minutes, clips of the interview went viral. Commentators across networks called it the most honest moment in WNBA history. Fans erupted in support. NBA players reposted the footage with fire emojis and clapping hands. Even rival WNBA stars, some of whom had been silent until then, began liking and sharing the video, adding subtle captions like "finally" or "say it louder." The movement had reached a new level. Hashtags began trending worldwide. Hashtag players over politics, hashtag let them speak, hashtag save women's basketball. Fans weren't just venting anymore, they were organizing. Some started petitions urging sponsors to side with the players or risk losing their money. Independent media outlets published deep-dive investigations into the WNBA's internal politics. Former players, long silent, stepped forward with their own stories of being benched, fined, or threatened for speaking out. Suddenly, it wasn't only Caitlin Clark under the spotlight. It was the entire league, every executive, every policy, every shadow decision. The walls of secrecy were cracking open, and at the center of it all stood Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull, refusing to step back. So what do you think? Has the WNBA reached a breaking point that could rewrite the league forever? Or is this only the beginning? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.